Now, what is breach attack simulation? First, let's talk about the cyber kill chain. So we know we've got things like reconnaissance, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation, command and control, and then actions on objectives. So what are they going to accomplish? Now, the nice thing from a defensive perspective is we have an opportunity to defend against this in multiple different aspects. So maybe we can't stop recon and weaponization, but the delivery, they're using email, and maybe we have some capabilities that defend against that. Now, once we do that, if that's the only mechanism for them to deliver their threat and we mitigate against it, well, then exploitation, installation, command and control, and actions on objectives can't be realized. They need to be able to deliver that threat first. And let's say they are able to. It gets past your email security device, and it's now in the inbox, and there's a link within the body of the email, and the user goes ahead and they click on it, and you have some defensive capabilities that might be in the cloud or on premise, doesn't really matter, that blocks the exploitation portion of that attack. Beautiful thing, again, installation, command and control, actions on objectives are never realized. So the opportunity for the defenders is real. But the adversary has also become very clever, and they find ways around this. If this don't work, then we're going to try this. Now, when we get into breach attack simulation, it focuses on simulating an attack on organizations' network and systems for the sole purpose to determine the overall security posture that's currently in place. And so this provides a methodology to simulate those attacks. It helps identify the weaknesses and vulnerabilities across a variety of attack vectors that might be exploited by the adversary, and it determines our security effectiveness and our opportunity to close those gaps in people, process, and technology. We want to cover all three aspects that allow us to defend against. So people, for example, if they're able to see an email that doesn't look right, they don't click on it, that's a good thing. Technology might block the email from getting in. And then the process might be is how we might handle certain incidents, or if the user sees an email, do they forward it off for additional inspection? So the opportunity is significant. Now, when we look at the process itself, the goal is to locate opportunities of weakness, but they need to understand the environment that they're targeting. Then they'll move to vulnerability scanning, and this is actually going to show and highlight those weaknesses. So now I know the environment enough that I can scan them specifically. And when I do that, I'm going to identify vulnerabilities that I could exploit. Then you might move into something like privilege escalation. So I've landed on a box and now I've escalated privilege. I've got more access. And in fact, you might even start over. You might do additional reconnaissance because now you've got a new pivot point, a new perspective, and the environment might look differently than you did from when you did your initial reconnaissance. But the goal here is to do lateral movement and start gaining access to additional systems. And then ultimately data exfiltration, so exfiltrate that sensitive data from the network. And then ultimately you build out that report. And that report will identify the gaps identified, all the weaknesses and vulnerabilities, and the recommendations for remediations. So this is where red and blue team really come together and start building out the defensive capabilities based on the red team's exercise here. And the goal here is to simulate this as if the adversary is targeting us. So we as a team improve our overall security posture, our ability to respond with accuracy moving forward. So as I mentioned, reconnaissance, vulnerability scanning, lateral movement, exploitation, you've got privilege escalation and data exfiltration that might take place. And so when we get into the tooling, there's commercial tools like AttackIQ, Metasploit, Cobalt Strike. A lot of the red teamers are going to know that. Open source, Caldera, OWASP, and Atomic Red Team has some capabilities as well. Lots of really interesting capabilities in the industry. Again, whether you want to use open source or commercial, we're going to use a flavor of both in the demos. So benefits include, well, we identify vulnerabilities. Simulating the attacks against networks and systems helps us uncover those vulnerabilities and the weaknesses within our security posture. This process highlights what controls detect and prevent and those that fail. And I think that's the most important piece. We want to know what fails. We want to be able to at least at a minimum detect. Ultimately, we'd love to be able to prevent 100% of everything. Reality is, well, we can't. Now, this also helps us prioritize security investments. If we highlight the adversaries that are targeting us and we see some significant weaknesses that we can't overcome, well, maybe that's where our investments might be from a security perspective. So compliance. So this drives towards regulatory and compliance requirements. But the key here is evidence-based testing. We're actually going to test this out. We'll demonstrate our ability to prevent, detect, and respond with security incidents. We'll avoid fines and other penalties for not meeting compliance because we're actually testing our security posture, not just implementing it. It's more than a checkbox. Now, continuous improvement. This is going to help us improve our overall security posture. We're going to be able to stay ahead of the threat landscape and emerging threats and identify areas of focus to move the needle with prevention and detection capabilities that matter. Training and awareness. Teams obviously have the ability to recognize and respond to security incidents. Because we're acting as the adversary and the red teamers' goal is to leverage the full extent of these capabilities, we're going to learn a lot as defenders. And the nice thing about it, if a real breach happens, well, we've been there and done that. We've actually lived and breathed it. We might simulate phishing emails, social engineering attacks, and other attacks that bring awareness. That helps improve that technology, people, and process element. And then hands-on exercises, real-world threats performed by adversaries focused on compromising specific organizations and verticals. This will elevate the team's capabilities. We'll close up here. This is the last piece. We're going to focus on tools, just talk about them real briefly, and then we're going to move into demos. So we've got open source and commercial. We're going to focus on Caldera, the open source element, and AttackIQ. So Caldera is a framework developed by MITRE that empowers cyber practitioners to save time, money with automated security assessments. It's scalable, automated, adversarial emulation platform. It's awesome. Now, autonomous adversary emulation is one of the things that we can drive towards, where we build specific threats based on the adversarial profiles and execute them within the environment. The goal here, again, is to test that current defensive capability. The blue team is ultimately part of the equation here, and it helps develop the skill sets for the organization. Then you can do test and evaluation of detection, analytic, and response platforms. So automated testing of defenses includes network-based controls, host-based defensive capabilities, logging, sensors, etc. Now we're going to focus on the emulation portion of it. That's the goal of this session. But we also have manual red team engagement. So assist red teamers augment their offensive tool set. So this might not be the only tool that they leverage, but this is a tool that they certainly can take advantage of. And it empowers the teams to extend beyond the framework. So you can build in your own custom tools if needed. Red versus blue research. So support research indirectly and directly in cyber gaming, emulation, simulation, automated offensive and defensive cyber operations. Now, the nice thing about this, you can actually go and certify on Caldera as well. They've got it built into the platform where you can go through exercises. And once you meet the right objectives, you complete a section of it. And then ultimately at the end, you could submit your final assessment basically and get certified on the platform. This is a screenshot. This is showing you the agents that are deployed in the organization, or you may have them simulated. And so you can see there's a couple here that are being simulated as well. Now, AttackIQ is fully managed breach and attack simulation service offered by a premier provider of MITRE ATT&CK. This is based on security control validation. The goal is to elevate our cybersecurity effectiveness and efficiency. Now, an interesting claim here is untested security controls operate at 39% effectiveness. That scares me a little bit, right? How many times we deploy next-gen firewall, we turn on some IPS, advanced malware, we've got a bunch of rules, and we're hoping the magic's happening all day, every day. Well, maybe there's signatures that aren't enabled that should be enabled. Maybe our endpoint detection response capability is missing an engine. This is how we can test our effectiveness. And if we're only getting 39%, then maybe this is an investment we should be making so we can get more juice out of that orange. Now they have the ability to do continuous testing, so adversaries can multi-staged attacks and assess your security controls with regularity using adversarial tactics and techniques. So again, if it's multi-stage or complex type attacks, we want to be able to simulate or emulate those within the environment. We want to evaluate our performance. We want line to miter attack. We want to automatically test our security programs for gaps, prioritize programs and strategies, and improve cybersecurity readiness. We can improve with evidence, right? Data from the adversary emulations helps improve defenses. We have coverage and integrations with endpoint detection response, next-gen firewalls, segmentation, native controls found in the cloud. So you could, as an example, tie in your endpoint detection response capability into AttackIQ, and it'll actually report back the findings from that endpoint capability that you might have deployed. Now, in production, connected to what matters. So here, again, multiple tests can be performed from your laptop, home office, or wherever. The bottom line is it's a model for testing your controls. Here's their AttackIQ operational resilience testing lifecycle. So you can see on the left, we've got alignment with MITRE. We've got our MITRE attack scenarios. We've got testing methodologies like atomic testing, very specific tests that we might drive towards. That's really our focus here. And then you get into attack graphs where you can simulate or emulate an attack flow. So an adversary might try to do X, and if X is successful, then they'll try AB. If it fails, they might try something else. And so you can build out these attack graphs and emulate or simulate those into your environment. They've got a PCAP replay as well. And then you can integrate some technologies, as I mentioned, EDR, next-gen firewall. You've got some great reporting. And there's some business outcomes. They talk about 57% efficiency gain for red team staff, 47% more efficient SecOps teams. You got 44% cost reduction in breaches and more effective security analysts. So all positive things that come out of this. Here's an example of AttackIQ and their MITRE attack matrix here. And again, I can look at this specifically from a tactic, technique, sub-technique perspective, and I can determine if I have a detection capability or a preventative capability. All right, building out an attack simulation. This is where we get into the demos.